Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin the seventh Perek of Masechta Nedarim on Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph. Zogt Heilige Mishnah, continuing the halachas of the languages a person uses in a neder, what's included and what's not included. Haneider min hayerek. Person makes a neder not to eat from yerek, which is usually translated as vegetables. Mutter b'dluin. He's allowed to eat dluin, which is squash. So there are two pshatim here in the Ran. One pshat is because yerek means when you have vegetables that have leaves that are edible, like lettuce or things like that, whereas the dluin is considered to be a peiri. It's not a yerek. Yerek means the green, the leaf. Another pshat that Ran says is yerek means something that's usually eaten raw, whereas the dluin, squash, is a vegetable that could only be eaten cooked, so it's not included in the language of a yerek. Rabbi Akiva says that it will be yaser. Dluin are included. So the Chachamim said to Rabbi Akiva, why do you say it's included? If a person would send someone and tell him, Kachli yerek, go and buy for me yerek, a vegetable yerek, and he comes back and he says, I only found dluin, I didn't find yerek. In other words, when the person tells him, go get me yerek, he knows that it does not include dluin, squash. And if you only find squash, you'll have to come back and tell the person that sent him that I only find squash. Do you want me to get squash or not? So from this itself we see that in the language of people, the dluin is not included in yerek. So why should it be aser in this neder? So Amalehem, Rabbi Akiva answers and says, Kein adava, this raya you're bringing me, this is true, and adarabba, I can bring you a raya from this to my opinion. Oy, Shema Imirhu, what would happen in this case that we just spoke about if it would be different? If this person would come back and say, Loi matzasi ala kitnis, you sent me to buy yerek, vegetables, but I only found kitnis, which are beans. Would he say that to the person that sent him? Beans definitely has nothing to do with vegetables. He's not going to come back and say, you sent me to get yerek, I only found beans. What does beans have to do with anything? He'll come back and say that I found dluin, I found squash. Why is he going to come back and say that to the one that sent him? Elashat dluin b'chlal yerek. That's because dluin, even though it's not exactly yerek, but nevertheless, if you don't find yerek, you may come back and say that I found dluin, I found squash. But the kitnis ain't b'chlal yerek. Beans is not included in the expression of yerek, vegetables, and therefore adarabba. From this that we see that the shliach would come back and say, I found dluin, shows that it is connected to the lashon of yerek, and that's why it's part of the neder. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, the language of this neder, yerek, the aser b'pul hamitzri lach, and he will not be allowed to eat pul hamitzri, some kind of beans that come from Mitzrayim, Egyptian beans, when they are moist, because then they're similar to yerakis, they're included in yerakis. But umutter biyavish. However, once these beans become dry, then he'll be allowed to eat them because it's not anymore like a vegetable. Then it becomes like a kind of a grain that's used maybe to make flour out of it, to make a dough out of it, and it's not included. Okay, so the Gemara is going to explain the machlokes of the Tanakama and Rabbi Akiva. What did it say in the Mishnah? The Tanakama says that you make a neder not to eat from yerek, you'll be allowed to eat from dluin. And Rabbi Akiva argues and says that no, you're not allowed to eat from the dluin, from squash. So it said in the Mishnah, Nedarim an yerek chulub. Fragt the Gemara, so v'ham yerek min yerek nodar. His neder was only from yerek, not to have a nor from vegetables. So why would this include dluin? Why would this include squash? In other words, the Gemara's question is, even though the Mishnah did give an explanation that when a person sends someone to buy vegetables, that if he doesn't find vegetables, he'll come back and say that I found squash. And the Tanakama says that proves that squash is not part of vegetables. On the other hand, Rabbi Akiva says it proves it is part of it, but the Gemara doesn't accept this explanation from the Mishnah. Because if in the lashon of yerek, it simply does not include squash, and like we see, if he sent the shliach, he will not buy the squash. So then, why would Rabbi Akiva say that the lashon of yerek should aser him from eating even the squash? Amarula, so Allah answers and explains, Ba'oime yarke kedeira alai. What this person said is that I will not eat the yerakis in a pot. That's what's aser upon me. So because he added yarke kedeira, so this includes not only the leafy vegetables that you can eat the green of it, but it also includes the dluin, which you cannot eat the leaves of it. That's according to the first pshat of the Ran. Or according to the second shot of the Ran, that says that the reason why usually Duluin are not included in the Yerakis because it's something that's only eaten cooked, and Yerakis means things that are eaten raw, but if you said Kedeira, so then that includes even something that's cooked in a pot. Fragt the Gemara, but how do you know? Vidilme, perhaps, Yerek hanechal b'kedeira kama. Maybe when he added the word kedeira, it doesn't include kinds of vegetables like squash, but rather it comes to include vegetables that are usually eaten in a pot. What does this refer to? So this refers to different kinds of vegetables that are usually used in a pot to add the taste to the ingredients in a pot, like garlic or onions, things like that add taste in the pot. So maybe when he said kedeira, he's referring to these kinds of vegetables. So according to the first pshat of the Ran, the Gemara is saying maybe really Yerakis means only the leafy vegetables, that you can eat the leaves from it. And the addition of kedeira is just adding these things like garlic, but it doesn't add things like duluin, like squash. Or according to the second pshat of the Ran, since squash could only be eaten cooked, it cannot be eaten raw. Maybe if he added the word kedeira, it comes to add and say that he includes in his neder such kind of vegetables that could be eaten both raw and cooked. But the duluin could only be eaten cooked. So who says that by adding kedeira, he adds a kind of vegetable like duluin which could only be eaten cooked? So the Gemara answers, "Ba'omer yerek hamizbashel bekedeira alai." He didn't only add the word kedeira in a pot, but he said the yerakis that are cooked in a pot. So by saying cooked in a pot, so that shows that it includes these duluin which are cooked in a pot. The extra words mizbashel bekedeira includes the duluin, and also according to the second pshat of the Ran, that it refers to the duluin that could only be eaten cooked in a pot. So he said mizbashel bekedeira. So that refers to those vegetables that are cooked in a pot. Okay, so now we can understand why, according to Rabbi Akiva, when he uses the lashon of yerek, even though yerek does not include usually vegetables like duluin, like squash, but because he added these words, so that shows that he also came to include something else, and we say that it includes even this squash. But now the Gemara asks, "V'mai kamiflegi?" So what is the basis of their machlokes? So in other words, even after the Gemara explained this pshat over here, that he added these words, and therefore Rabbi Akiva holds that it includes more, but the Gemara still wants to understand, so what is the basis of their machlokes? Why does Rabbi Akiva say that it adds more and adds these duluin, and the Tanakama says it does not? So now we go back to what it said in the Mishnah. Rabbanan Savri, Rabbanan hold, Kol Miltze, that Tzarech Shliach La'amlucha Allah. If it's something, so if you sent a Shliach, and the shliach couldn't find the yerakis, and the shliach would have to come back and ask the mishaleach, the person that sent him, I only found duluin. Would you want to have duluin as well? So if this is something that he would have to consult with the one that sent him, so then lav minehu. That shows that it's not that type that he sent you for. That's why you have to come back and ask. But Rabbi Akiva savar, however, Rabbi Akiva's opinion is kol milse the mimlech shlicha Allah minehu. If it's something that the shliach has to come and consult, it's included in this min. It is considered to be the min of a yerek. So even though this is the hesber that it said in the Mishnah, but the Gemara first explained that it has to be that he added the words mizbashel, because if he didn't add the words mizbashel, then even Rabbi Akiva would for sure agree that it's not included in the lashon of yerek. But because he added the word mizbashel b'kedeira, so therefore Rabbi Akiva says that since this is something that he's asking the mishalech, maybe you would want this as well, therefore we say that mizbashel b'kedeira includes also the duluin. Okay, but after all of this, the Gemara actually now explains that Amar Abaye Meider Rabbi Akiva l'Inyan Malka She'eino Loike. Rabbi Akiva would agree that if his neder was not to eat from yerek, which means either leafy vegetables, or according to the other pshat of the Ran, it means vegetables that are eaten raw, so the duluin, squash, is not included, and therefore regarding malchus, he will not get malchus. When Rabbi Akiva said that it's included in the neder, it's only a chumrah midrabanan because the language he said is mirames also to the duluin. Because he said mizbashel b'kedeira, we include the duluin as well. But minatayre, he's not going to get malchus on this because he said the lashon of yerek. Now the Gemara brings a mishnah in Masechta Me'ilah. Tanan Asam, we learned in the Mishnah Me'ilah that before I read the Mishnah, the rule by Me'ilah is usually there's a klal that ain't shliach l'dvar aveda. You send the shliach to do an aveda, so the shliach is the one that is responsible for the aveda and not the mishaleach. There's a few exceptions. One exception is Me'ilah. By Me'ilah, you learn from a pasuk that yes, shliach l'dvar aveda, you send the shliach if the shliach fulfilled what the mishaleach asked him to do, so then the mishaleach, the one that sent him, will be the one that's misusing the hektish, and he will be responsible. If the shliach did not follow orders of the mishaleach, then the shliach himself will be responsible for what he did. That's the rule of this Mishnah here. So the Mishnah says, "Ashliach she'asa shlichusai," the shliach that fulfilled the shlichus, balabayis mal. So the balabayis that sent him, he's the one that's moil. Lo yasa shlichusai. But if the shliach did not follow orders, he did his own thing, he changed. So then shliach mal. So then the shliach is going to be the one. He's misusing the hektish in his own way, not following the orders of the one that sent him. So now, based on what we learned over here, in Rabbi Akiva's opinion, the Gemara is going to bring the continuation of that Mishnah and argue and say that that Mishnah is not like Rabbi Akiva. So man Tana, who's the Tana of that Mishnah? If we're going to look there at the seif of that Mishnah, Amar Rav Chisda, Masnisin the like Rabbi Akiva. That Mishnah there is not following Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Because the Mishnah continues and explains, Keitzad, what's an example of a person that's following the orders of the balabas and a person that's doing something differently than he was asked. Amaloi, the balabas said to him, 10 basaloirchim. Here, take this meat, which belonged to Hektish, and he says, here, and give it to offer it to eat for the guests. V'nasan lahem kaved. And instead of feeding them basar, he gave them kaved, which is liver. So he didn't do exactly what the balabas wanted. 10 kaved, or the balabas tells them, give them liver, and v'nasan lahem basar. And instead, he goes and gives them a piece of meat. So in such a case, hashliach moal, the shliach that didn't follow orders of the balabas, so the shliach is the one that's misusing the hektish. That's the example that the Mishnah there gives. Frag the Gemara, but now we Rabbi Akiva, if that Mishnah would be following Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Rabbi Akiva, but didn't Rabbi Akiva say over here, Kol milse de mimlach Allah shliach minei. Again, Kol milse de mimlach Allah shliach, anything that if a mishaleach sends a shliach to buy something, and the shliach doesn't find that, and he comes back and he consults with the one that sent him, would you want this? That's similar to what you sent me for to get? Minehu, it's considered to be the same min. So if so, over here, when it comes to basar and kaved, so why shouldn't we say the same thing? If you send someone to the marketplace to go pick up a piece of meat, and you don't find a piece of meat, you just find a piece of liver, isn't that a kind of thing that's similar enough that you would consult with the mishaleach, do you want me to get liver meat for you? So if so, limol balabayis, the balabayis should be mile here as well, v'loy limol shliach, and the shliach should not be mile. This should be considered that the shliach is following the orders of the balabas. The Ram points out over here, even though the Gemara before clearly said that even though Rabbi Akiva said that in such a case it's part of the neder, but it's only part of the neder midrabanan. Minatayri you're not moil, right? So how can the Gemara ask this question? So the Ran says because in this case it's even stronger than the case of the Mishnah. Because in the case, yerek and dluin are not the same thing. Yerek is leafy vegetables, it's vegetables eaten raw, and dluin is squash, which is not eaten raw in it. It's not a leafy vegetable. It's just because there was a remez, because he said mizbashal b'kedera, so we say it's included. But over here, basar and kaved are much closer to each other. There are different types of meats from the animal. So in such a case, Rabbi Akiva should definitely hold that it's considered to be that you follow the orders of the balabas. That's why the Gemara is asking the question that this is not according to Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye said, Afilatay Rabbi Akiva. No, that Mishnah could follow Rabbi Akiva's opinion. And the point is, we can't compare the halacha of Me'ilah, what's included in Me'ilah, and the halacha of a neder. Why? Miloi Maida Rabbi Akiva, would Rabbi Akiva not admit that the tzarich im luchi, that this shliach that is not going to be doing exactly what the balabas told him, shouldn't he have to consult first with the balabas? In other words, what the Gemara means to say is, like the Ran explains, when it comes to Me'ilah, the Mishnah is using dafka, this example, to make the point that only if you did precisely what the balabas told him, then the shliach is going to be mile. But when it comes to a neder, over here there's a chiddush that by neder you have to look at the lashon of what the person means. And if it's something which he consults with the balabas about this, because it's similar to the actual lashon that he said, so then it's possible it could be included in the neder. But by Me'ilah, it doesn't work that way. In order for you to be his shliach, it has to be mamish exactly what he said. So it's not the same thing. Itme shmaita kamei derove. This sugya here, the discussion about the halacha regarding a neder and how Me'ilah is different, was learned in front of Rave, and this answer of Abaye was said. Amalahoin, and Abaye said, Shapir Oma Nachmeni. Rave said, what Nachmeni said is right. Even though we find always in the Gemara, Abaye and Rava argue very often. But over here, Rava said, what Nachmeni is Rava. The Ran says because Nachmeni is Abaye, I meant to say, sorry. And the reason is because he was raised by Rabbi Bar Nachmeni. He was a Yasim, and he was raised by Rabbi Bar Nachmeni, so he was called Nachmeni. That's what, there are others that say actually that his real name was Nachmeni. I think it's the Aruch that says that his name was actually Nachmeni. Okay, going back to what it said in the Mishnah. So in the Mishnah there was the Tanakame that argued with Rabbi Akiva and said that if you make a neder not to have anah from yerek, from vegetables, you're allowed to have anah from the deluin, from the squash. Even though squash is similar to vegetables to some extent, and if you can't find squash or you can't find vegetables in the marketplace, so you're going to ask the person that sent you, should I bring you squash instead? So even though it's similar, it's not considered to be part of the neder. So the Gemara is not going to bring the source of who is the Tanakama of our Mishnah. Man Tana de Polagale de Rabbi Akiva. Who is the Tanakama that argued with Rabbi Akiva and said that the luin is not part of the neder of Yerek? Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. It's Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. The Tanya will learn in Abraisa, Hanoidim min basar. A person makes a neder not to eat basar. So that's the term he used, meat. Asr b'chol mine basar. He'll be asr to eat any kinds of meat from an animal, all kinds of animals, whatever it is, all kinds of meat. So that's regarding the types of animals, from any types of animals. Now there's also different sections of the animals, different kinds of meat from different parts of the animal. Vasa b'raish, meat that comes from the head, b'raglayim, from the feet, b'koneh, from the throat, b'koved, liver, ubelev, from the heart, and also uba'ifis, also not allowed to eat the meat from the chicken. However, he is allowed to eat fish, the meat from the fish, or from grasshoppers. That's the Tanakama. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel argues and says, you made a neder not to eat from basar, asur b'chol mine basar. So you're not allowed to eat any type of basar from any type of animal. But umutter b'reish b'raglayim b'koneh b'kaved u'belev. He's allowed to eat from the meat that comes from the head, or the feet, or the throat, or the liver. These are unique pieces of the behemoth that is not usually the term of what meat means. And u'ba'ifis, also chicken. Vein tzarich leimam, needless to say, basadagna v'chagavim. That'll be allowed to eat from fish or from grasshoppers. V'chein hay Rab Shimon Gamliel leime. Rab Shimon Gamliel also used to say, kravayim lav basar. If you eat from the intestines of an animal, that's not included in the lashon of basar. And he actually said something else. V'oichleyen, someone that eats them, apparently it's disgusting, or it's not really something that's really edible. So someone that eats them, lav barinish. He's not eating something that's made for human consumption. So the Gemara here says, according to the Bach, you add over here actually, Lamai Hilchase, what is this relevant for? To say that he's not a mensch? Oichleyen kibasar, then he's saying that you eat them, that kibasar le'inyan zvini. Like when it comes to a person that's trying to buy basar in the marketplace, and there's basar available to buy. And instead of buying a regular piece of meat that's edible for human beings, he buys these intestines from the animal, lav barinish. He's not a mensch. It's not clear in the Lashon of the Gemara what exactly is the relevance of this. I mean, especially according to the Girsa of the Bach, Lamai Hilchas said that there's some kind of a halacha that you learn out of this. What's the halacha other than just saying that this is not really something that's made for a person to eat? There are some Mefarshim that say that the relevance of this Gemara is for the halacha in Yerideyah that when you have something that's ru'in le'eskabed, something that people that is it's a choshev of food that you offer for people that you serve for guests, so then it won't be batal bereiv. In many cases. So over here, a piece of basar is something which is royal iskabed. That's a piece of basar that you serve for people. But these intestines from the animal is not considered to be a chashav, a piece of meat that people usually eat, and therefore it doesn't fall into that category. That's the relevance of this halacha. But in the Gemara itself, it doesn't spell out, it doesn't explain. Al Kapanim, here we see, Rab Shimon Gamliel is the one that said that when you say basar, so those sections of the animal that people don't usually eat, like from the head or from the throat, it's not included in basar. That's the Tanakam of our Mishnah that says that even though dluin is similar to yerek, it's not included in yerek. But now the Gemara goes back to what it said regarding basar oif, according to the opinion of the Tanakam over here. Why the Tanakam says that when you use the term basar, so that includes even the basar of a oif, even chicken as well. The Ovid Shlicha, and the reason is the Ovid Shlicha the Mimla Chalei. Because if you would send a shlich to buy you a piece of meat and he doesn't find a piece of meat, he'll come and ask you, should I buy you chicken instead? If so, basa dogim nami, shouldn't it be the same when it comes to fish? Ovid shlicha, that it's common for a shliach, if he doesn't find meat, he doesn't find chicken, so this shliach will come back and mimlach alei, and he'll ask you, do you want to have fish instead? So this should be included in the nether as well. The Amar, Iloi meshkachne bisra, and the shlich would say, if I can't find meat, I see dogim, so I'll bring you fish. So if so, v'litzru, it should also be asa in the nether. So if chicken is included in the lashon basar, so fish should also be included. So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye, you're right. Usually the fish would be included, but over here this is a unique case. Kagoin shehikis dam. Because this person that sent you to buy this meat, he just had blood taken out from him and it makes him very weak. And in such a case, the loy achol dogim. It's not healthy to eat fish after you had blood taken out. It's not good for that. So therefore, fish is not included. But in a regular case, according to this answer, the Gemara, fish would be included. If that's the kind of person we're talking about, so even chicken, a person that just had blood taken out, should not eat chicken as well. Because Shmuel had said, the mesucher, or according to other gears over here, the mesuber, a person that's someone that blood was taken out of him, v'achol bisra de tzafra, and he eats the meat of a chicken, parach libe ketzafra, his heart is going to tremor, it's going to shake like a chicken that flies. In other words, it's not good for the heart to eat chicken after you let blood. V'tanya, in a brayse we learned, ein makizin loyal dogim, a person that takes out blood, he shouldn't do it not when he's eating fish, v'loyal loifis, not eating chicken, v'loyal basam eliach, and not when he's eating salted meat. And Vitanya we learned in the Braise, hikis dam, person that just took out blood, lo yochel lo cholav, you shouldn't eat milk, lo gvina, not cheese, lo beitzim, not eggs, and lo shachalayim, which I think is translated as cress, a certain type of vegetable, v'lo oifis, and not birds, v'lo basam eliach, and not salted meat. So you see over here that chicken and fish is the same when it comes to this individual that let blood. So how could you say that this is the distinction between why chicken is included in the neder and fish is not? So the Gemara answers, Shani oifis, when it comes to chicken that's not healthy for a person that just took out blood, the efsher al yedei shlike, that it is healthy for this person to eat it if it's cooked very, very well. So therefore, chicken is going to be included in this neder, even for this person that was just makis dam, that just took out blood. Gemara gives another pshat. What's the distinction between fish and chicken? Why chicken is included in the neder and fish is not? Abaye says, we're talking about a person that his eyes, he has an issue with his eyes. So the dogim koshem le'inayim, because we know that fish is not good for the eyes. Fragt the Gemara, ihachi achol dogim. So the Gemara says, no, fakert, a person that he has an issue with his eyes, this person should eat fish. Fish is actually healthy for him. The Ha'ama Shmuel, because Shmuel said, a remes, you find from the Aleph base, Nun, Samech, Ayin, these three letters that come one after the other, what can we learn out from this? Nuna, that a person that eats fish, so nuna is fish in Aramaic, sama le'enayim. That's like it's a sam, it's a medicine for the eyes. So Adarabah, it says that fish is actually healthy for the eyes. So the Gemara answers, Hahu soif uchla. That's only a person that's at the end of the illness, meaning that his eyes were hurting him and he had an issue with his eyes for a while, and now it's at the end of the illness, then fish is good for him. But a person that is the beginning of the illness with his eyes, fish is not good for him, and therefore we're speaking about a person that has this illness, and therefore fish is not included.